Hello people, I'm Ali, and this is What This Is, the lore channel about duels taking place in the Warcraft universe, where characters in the Warcraft franchise fight to the death. Sorry for the long delay since the last video, I've been quite busy and hope to get back on a better schedule soon. I'm a WoW player for France and English is not my native language. Just tell me if there is any trouble with my pronunciation or anything else in the comments. Gnomes, Goblins. The smallest denizens of Azeroth are also the most clever, the most creative, the most explosive and the funniest of them. Given the extent of their technology compared to the medieval world in which they live, they should be ruling everyone already, but their interest in knowledge, tech and explosions largely surpass any motivation they have to go to war. However, they still live in the world of Warcraft. Besides, they can stand each other, each of them being the rival race of the other in the tinkering department, to the great confusion of all the other races. With the Alliance stands the lost gnome kingdom of Gnome, indebted in blood to the humans and the dwarves after their help against the orcs and the trogs, and it is led by Gelbin Mekkatorque, genius and high tinker, leading his people through hells in the Second War. The Horde always had good trade relations with mischievous goblins, but after the orcs rescued the exiles of the Bridgewater cartels from Kazan, its greedy trade prince Jastor Gallywix managed to secure himself a palace by allying permanently with the Horde. These two are actually leading two wars against each other, and none would resist the challenge to put their wit to the test in order to prove, once and for all, who's the smartest tinker of Azeroth.
The drums of war thunder once again.
Gelbin Mekkatorque was an aged gnome male born decades before the First War in the underground city of Gnome. A prolific and talented tinker, his intellectual and mechanical prowesses earned him so much respect from his peers that he was elected king according to the meritocratic technocracy of Gnome. A wise and diplomatic leader, he entertained excellent relationships with the neighboring kingdoms of Ironforge and Stormwind, and when the Cosmodan was invaded by the Horde at the start of the Second War, all three races were united as the first backbone of the Alliance. During the war, Mekkatorque oversaw all the technological power of the Alliance, adding submarines, tanks and gyrocopters to its army, and eventually he triumphed and saved his world. This was not the end of the Gnomes' world. On the eve of the Third War, they were plagued by underground attacks from rabid trogs clawing their way from underneath Gnome. Trusting his best friend and advisor, Sickle Thermoplug, to find a way to quell the crisis, King Gelbin agreed to his plan to irradiate the emptied lower sections of the city to destroy the enemy and get rid of the trogs. Thermoplug, however, envious of Mekkatorque's position, intended to have 30% of the gnome population killed before using his weapon to save the rest from the trogs and be hailed as the new high tinker. His plan backfired when the radiation was propelled onto the entire city by the ventilation system, leading to the death of 80% of the population and the infection of many others. Mekkatorque had to order the evacuation of the city to save what remained of his kind, leaving an infected Thermoplug to rule a population of trogs and maddened leper gnomes. The exiles of Gnome was forced to hold up in Ironforge within the new quarter of Tinkertown, linking Ironforge to Stormwind, and from there they became staunch allies of the Alliance once again. Mekkatorque's efforts in Ironforge strove on for the years to retake Gnome and eventually succeeded in conquering back part of the city and cutting Thermoplug in two, founding the capital of New Tinkertown for his people. He has continued to be one of the main leaders of the Alliance, the oldest member since the Second War, and thanks to his designs, glorious gunships led through all their battles. Mekkatorque was notably present in his mecha suit during the Battle of the Broken Shore at the side of Verin Vryn and Gen Greymane, and the last one to escape with the latter. Following this tragedy, he commanded his people to prepare to defend Azeroth in any way necessary, leading to the creation of Gnome Hunters. He is likely to evolve again in the future of World of Warcraft. Jastor Gallywix was an adult goblin male, born decades before the First War on Copper Street in Judgetown on the island of Khazan. His mother being gone on pirate adventures, he was raised by his tinker-lover father, Lozek, and the ambitious little goblin quickly became frustrated with his father's lack of financial initiative. Intending to leave the house and become a pirate, he changed his mind when he witnessed his father being beaten down for money and cookies, and instead used all the explosive inventions he could to blow up the entire gang of bullies. He became a street thug, ruling over Copper Street, and bought all the businesses in town one by one, including that of his father. Gallywix rose to prominence in Khazan, soon beginning to covet the seat of power at the top of the Beachwater cartel, occupied by trained Prince Maldi. In love with Maldi's daughter, Gallywix used their relationship to lead aggressive buys of Maldi's assets and took down all of his power, betraying his lover for a stronger emotion driving his heart: greed. Gallywix managed to secure the position of trade prince and enjoyed his position of power in Khazan, among other corporations like the Steamwidow Cartel and the Venture Company. Throughout the years, he maintained the neutrality of the cartel, trading with both the Horde and the Alliance. This state of peace came to an end with the awakening of Deathwing, who triggered an eruption of Mount Gajaro among all the catastrophes caused by the cataclysm. Khazan was engulfed in flames, and Gallywix struck down from power. He managed to maintain his hold over the goblins by enslaving them to maneuver his escape ships, and the survivors ended up stranded on the Lost Isles. Gallywix fought for power with his rivals while attempting to survive the numerous horrors of the place, and the Bilgewater Cartel ended up finding a way out of the Isles by freeing Warchief Thrall from Alliance warships. The Orcs brought the goblins back to Durotar, where Gallywix was reinstalled by the new Warchief Garrosh Hellscream as trade prince of the cartel in exchange for his full allegiance to the Horde. With his longtime friend and enforcer Druz, Gallywix had himself a pleasure palace built in Azshara, with a gigantic image of his face sculpted into the mountainside. Initially supportive of Garrosh's water fort against the Alliance, the Bilgewater Cartel supplied Horde with advanced technology and squads until the war in Pandaria. Gallywix had sent the Plunder Squad initiative after an artifact, Blank Scroll, a portal of the future, and through its use, it became obvious that it should remain hidden, and that Garrosh was a danger. The Corcron refused payment after payment, and Gallywix understood that fortune had shifted. He was the last to ally himself with the Darkspear Rebellion, and participated in the siege of Orgrimmar, relying behind Warchief Vol'jin and then Warchief Sylvanas after the Battle of the Broken Shore. Fearful of the Burning Legion, Gallywix remained holed up in his pleasure palace, pushing back the waves of invasion forces from Azshara. He is still quite likely to evolve in the future of World of Warcraft. Gnome and Goblin rivalry has been a matter of fun since Warcraft 2, and their completely out-of-tone technology makes for conflicts full of explosions, hijinks and discombobulated chickens. So, yeah, let's just pit the head gnome against the head goblin to see who's the best. Easy. Should be a clear indicator of which side owns the best technology. Their contempt for the other side's tinkering is old and bad enough for them to just start firing at each other on the spot. Given the heavy reliance on technology, both characters will be considered as they were during the Legion expansion, with their full arsenal at their disposal.
My child, I watched with pride as you grew into a weapon of righteousness.
Gnomes are humanoids of very small stature, with a very large head, descendant from the Mecha Gnomes, titanic creatures of a Keeper Mimiron and transformed into mammals by the curse of flesh. Although extremely short, their titanic nature gives them very sturdy bones and very supple articulations. Mekkatorque is a very old gnome. All the ill effects brought by advanced age, but on the multiple occasions he has been described in a fight, he showed impressive control of his body, as well as a brain able to endure and keep working under any sort of physical stress. The very large and thick skull of the gnomes helps with that. Able to enter battlefields and ride his Mechanostrider into combat without much effort, we could say that Gelbin Mekkatorque is in excellent physical condition given his age. As a goblin, Jastor Gallywix is of course short but can still endure quite a lot thanks to his bone structure. His main physical advantage is still the years he spent surviving in Copper Street, fighting his way to the top as a corporate thug. A youth of hand-to-hand combat gave him a body capable of holding his own even against orcs, and he was notably able to be a physical match for Garrosh Hellscream himself. After his ascension to the position of Trade Prince, he gained a lot of weight and looks much more fat than most goblins, but he has lost nothing of the endurance of his youth. With a quite notable physical condition, Jastor Gallywix is besides aided by the fact that everyone would tend to underestimate him in this area. The gap between these two is not very wide, and it would be hard to say who is the strongest between gnomes and goblins, but in this case, the result remains clear. Gallywix is younger, taller, and has a more trained body than his opponent, as he had to survive in much harsher conditions. Although Gelbin can hold on against the goblin, Jastor Gallywix wins the physical edge.
Fight! Kill! Salute!
As the leader of the Alliance in the Second War, Gelbin Mekkatorque has been exposed to combat for a very long time, although he hardly took part in any battle himself. His most direct experience can be assessed from the invasion of the Trogs, where he could devise new ways of fending off all of his enemies with any part of his environment and set traps against their weak points with no preparation at all. Gelbin is not a warrior, but he is a tinker, able to use everything in order to fight his fights, no matter his equipment. He notably uses his extensive knowledge of anatomy to strike like a surgeon and inflict deadly damage on his enemies. Even if no training, the gnome's wit makes for a very effective battle capability. Although he does not behave like a taker himself, Jastor Gallywix is quite talented in the use of grenades, explosives and firearms to lead a battle, and is strong enough to lead on the battlefield himself. He is just too much of a coward to do it unless he has to. Grown in the violence of Copper Street, he is an expert in street fighting and will hold his own against many warriors or rogues, with no qualms about using cheap tricks against whoever opposes him. He even shows bravery when set into combat, and the physical force to back it up. Jastor may be a dirty bastard who will never take a risk he doesn't have to, but he won't be afraid to do so and fight with everything he has at his disposal, especially destructive technology. In this case, we have two very intelligent and adaptive fighters, but one relies on technology far more than the other. And unlike the High Tinker, Jastor Gallywix was trained for actual combat, aside from the use of any equipment or trick. He It has been made clear in the lore that he is able to fight back against very capable combatants in direct battle, which gives him a clear superiority against Mekkatorque. The battle capability edge goes to Jastor Gallywix.
Halt, lad. There's an inscription on the dais. It's a warning. It says, "Whomsoever takes up this blade shall wield power eternal. Just as the blade rends flesh, so must power scar the spirit."
As a high tinker, Gelbin Mekkatorque is one of the greatest engineers in the world, with likely access to the best of Gnome technology. Flamethrowers, chicken rays, shrinkers, enlargers, net throwers, tasers, rocket boots, teleporters and top-notch gyrocopters, you name it, they have it. The main problem with all this is this tech's tendency to backfire in unpredictable ways. Aside from this, Gelbin has been instrumental in the consumption of the Alliance's siege engines, and one such as a Gnome would not hesitate to break a tank into a knife fight. Besides, he owns a mecha suit made for heavy battle and invented the Mechanostrider, meaning he probably has the best in the world available. Under all of this, Gelbin Mekkatorque is still clad in an impressive suit of plate armor despite his age, and wears mithril engineering goggles crafted for him by Cyclope Thermoplug when they were still friends. They are excellent protection, aside from helping him executing very precise tasks in any condition. He has most often been depicted with a mechanical shield, able to intercept any hit and block enemy weapons, as well as an enormous electrical wrench called Wrench Caliber. High voltage, whatever it does. Whatever the circumstances, we can consider Gelbin Mekkatorque to always be able to improvise on the spot with what is available to him at the moment, always making him equipped with deadly force. Although a rogue and not a tinker, Jastor Gallywix's equipment is full of goblin tech. He has been dispatching his opponents with grenades and explosives since his youth, and will not hesitate to use all sorts of rockets to dispatch his enemy. He notably owns the Nubber Zeppelin for aerial transport. He probably owns the best and most expensive of Goblin turbo-trikes. Although he does not wear any sort of armor, he carries a ridiculous scepter to showcase his wealth and usually goes to battle in Spider Tank, a fully armed combat vehicle able to carve a path of devastation in any direction. Aside from this, his heavy jewelry makes the most of his attire. Both combatants have plenty of gear to go around, but Gelbin is still a tinker, whereas Gallywix is not. The Gnome is far more covered and protected than his Goblin counterpart, and has an actual very dangerous weapon. It must appear as obvious that the equipment edge goes to Gelbin Mekkatorque.
All my life I have lived by the sword. I've seen kingdoms burn, and watched brave heroes die in vain.
Among the current leaders in the Alliance, Gelbin Mekkatorque is, with Gangraymane, the only one to have been active as king during the Second War. He faced the Orcish Horde, the Trogg invasion, the destruction of his clan, and then all the conflicts in which the Alliance has been involved in up to Legion, which makes him one of the most experienced characters in World of Warcraft. He is notably a great crafter of military vehicles and such, and has witnessed all the breathtaking exploits of the Alliance. This gives him an excellent understanding that no battle is ever hopeless, and he is perfectly able to lead in combat. His talent for strategy is boosted by his immense intellect, and the only flaws in his strategies lies in his understanding of himself and those close to him. Although he has hardly participated in direct combat, not recklessly that is, he has seen everything and will face everything with a plan or three in mind. As someone who rose from a past of crime, violence and explosions, Jastor Gallywix had his share of plotting, strategizing and finding ways to blow up opponents stronger than you all at once. As a crime lord, he's always been a politician and a war general of sorts, although quite a different one from those the Horde is used to. His capacity for retaining power is impressive given the dangers of a world he has been surrounded by, and he has demonstrated the ability to improvise no matter what the situation is. Able to sacrifice love and family to satisfy his honest thirst of power, his driven greed allowed him to remain on top of the Bilgewater cartel despite his downfall at the hands of the other refugees from Kazan. Unlike many goblins, he doesn't fear the battlefield and will not hesitate to step on it to give his orders, especially if they involve explosions. Gallywix will never give up, even in the face of death for a far more superior opponent, and should never be underestimated. While I think Gallywix has largely fought more in his life than Gelbin Mekkatorque, his experience of strategy and combat rules stem from street fighting and low power level conflicts, while the Gnome King has been involved in straight-up great wars from the very beginning. He's been using high-tech and complicated conflicts since then, and has faced far more desperate times than Gallywix, with far greater at stake, since he's had to fight for his entire people and not just for himself. Besides, he's older. I believe such challenges mean that Gelbin Mekkatorque must win the battle experience edge.
In secret, I began harvesting what energies I could. I had a brief taste of true power.
Just like banning gnomes, Gelbin Mekkatorque has a very special approach of magic. He tends to incorporate it with technology, and it can be a little difficult to distinguish between the magical and the electrical. However, most gnome technology, such as those involving teleportation, changes in size or subtle appearances from chickens, are likely to involve some form of magic, added to the fact that the race's knack for engineering stems from the titanic spark they inherited from the titan Norganon when he empowered their creator, the Keeper Mimiron. As one equipped with so much tech, Mekkatorque is likely to have one or two sparks of magic in his pockets, although he's nothing like a mage. Hardly a magic user, Jastor Gallywix's only connection to magic seems to be the potions and explosives he is susceptible to use to destroy whatever it is he wishes to destroy. Many of the grenades he may possess to burst through anything likely have magical or chemical properties he is likely to understand. Otherwise, he holds no magical capability of his own. Although neither combatant has any magical power of his own, we can compare the level in this area by comparing the level of technology we use and the magic within. Gnomish tech includes a lot of arcane and dimensional magic, something more rare in goblin alchemy, which relies on various kinds of explosives. Besides, Gallywix relies far less on his tech than Gelbin, and the latter has range caliber. The magical resources edge goes to Gelbin Mekkatorque.
Faith is a powerful weapon.
So I'm told. The Alliance has the light from which to draw its strength. What steels this iron horde in its darkest hours?
Aside from the usual comparison between Gnome and Goblin technology, there's not much to go on here to decide if one has a form of magic which would help him against the other. Given that a bitter war is still being waged to determine who are the greatest engineers of Azeroth, that question can officially be classified as unresolved. No edge can be gained from the magical comparison.
You Pandaren tried to bury your hate and your anger, but such power cannot be contained. It must be unleashed!
A genius and a wise leader, Gelbin Mekkatorque has a complex personality, even for a gnome. Despite his extreme intelligence, he failed to foresee the betrayal of Thermoplug, his own best friend, and blamed himself for all the subsequent horrors his people had to suffer because of this. As a result, he tends to be disturbed by his inability to understand his own emotions and the behavior of those close to him. This despite the fact that he's probably smart enough to map the entire universe if he'd set himself on it. Always calculating, always observing, deducing, and thinking forward. Figuring out this kind of stuff is the only sort of knowledge that seems to elude him, and is one big strategic weakness. Despite this, he is wise beyond his long years, loyal to a fault, and a brave and honorable gnome. Even among the general greediness of his fellow goblins, Jastor Gallywix is a rather unsavory character. Ruthless and a complete self-proclaimed egotist, he would literally sell anything or anyone to anybody if it meant profit. His own book claims that the only important thing in his life is winning, and that should Azeroth be destroyed, he would buy the Dark Portal and sell fleeing tickets to all refugees trying to run through. Although he has shown affection for his parents and lover, he betrayed and backstabbed them all for his own profit, clearly stating that love should not step in the way of greed. Yes, not the other way around. Goblin morality can be a bit peculiar. While he will not take any risks that would not bring him a well-calculated source of profit, he can show impressive courage as long as there's something in it for him, or is as far as taking on Garrosh Hellscream one-on-one. Besides, like most goblins, his ability to estimate the dangers of an explosion is rather unreliable, and even when taking his greed into account, his behavior always remains somewhat unpredictable. Rather than very sturdy characters, Gallywix is far more likely to lose his cool than Mekkatorque. He'd hardly try, actually. However, goblins always function like that. Their intelligence stems from instinct and wit, more than from advanced reasoning like it does for gnomes. Not only does it make them more suited to a chaotic combat environment, but a goblin's erratic mind is usually more of a strength than a weakness, especially against a strategist who struggles to predict and understand others. Another element is that Gallywix is used to be surrounded by enemies, even working with them, and will remain cool under pressure, whatever it means for him. The psychological edge goes to Jastor Gallywix.
To ask why we fight is to ask why the leaves fall. It is in their nature. Perhaps there is a better question.
The fight would probably stem from a rivalry between goblins and gnomes over control of a contested territory, my best guess being the Badlands, where goblins have holdings and where the ancient sleeping city of the gnomes, Uldaman, lies under the mountain. These Tinkers are not fans of honorable duels to the death, and this would all probably start with an assassination attempt. Using his Uber Zeppelin, Gallywix would fly over the convoy escorting the Gnome King, intending to merely bomb drop him to a fiery death. Anti-aerial gnomish scanners are better than this, however, and Mekkatorque would have anticipated the attack. Persuaded he was exploding the enemy to death, Gallywix would be loafing in the sky while carpet bombing the Badlands, but unbeknownst to him, all he would be destroying would be a robot chicken version of the Gnome King and his escort. Descending from the heavens in his gyrocopter, a clothed Gelbin Mekkatorque would be aiming at the trade prince, preparing to drop him. The expert shots of the Second War veteran would not miss the Uber Zeppelin, who would immediately catch on fire. Used to exploding zeppelins, Gallywix would stir and prepare for the crash, but before doing this, he would still use the cannons to hit Mekkatorque in the air. Goblin machine guns are top-notch, and he would have the time to hit the Gnome King and make him drop before having to save himself. Both plummeting to the ground, Mekkatorque and Gallywix would anticipate the survival of their opponent and parachute themselves out of the doomed flying machines. They would do so with the appropriate equipment, however. Sitting like a king in the central platform, Gallywix would activate his spider tank under him and land on its heavy metallic legs, while the gnome would have notched before equipping his mechanic war suit. Both stranded in the Badlands, the fumes of the crashes would feed them in on the location of the enemy, and they would both charge toward each other. Once they'd be in sight, a robotic battle would begin. Gelbin's warsuit is more resistant than Gallywix's spider tank, but the latter has better maneuverability, allowing the goblin to climb wherever he wants in the canyons and shoot from unexpected places. This would not be enough to compensate Gelbin's superior firepower, conceived to lead a battle, not just survive it. Heavy chunks of rock and explosions would fly all over the place, while the cannons tried to explode each other. Choosing to unleash his best artillery, Gallywix would fire a heavy goblin rocket, clearly enough to destroy the warsuit. Mekkatorque expects such tactics, however, and has the counter for it, the multi-dimensional Porter's dispenser. With perfect timing, the Gnome King would open a rift in front of him to swallow the rocket and teleport it right behind Gallywix. No warrior, no rogue, and hardly anyone in Aurore could have dodged this. Except for goblins. Goblins are the only creatures in the universe mad enough not to fear rockets. Hearing the missile diving from behind, the trade prince wouldn't even look and would make his spider tank jump out at the last possible moment, dodging it and aiming it right back at the Gnome King. Even the old tinker could not avoid that, and the explosion would blast the warsuit away, while Gallywix turns around and avoids looking at the fire, just to show how cool he is. The trade prince's pride is a weakness, however. While reveling in his success, he would not notice that Gelbin is heavy armored enough to have survived. Besides, the warsuit of the Gnome King holds more secrets than one would think. Having jumped out of it to escape the blast, Mekkatorque would have done so on a deployable Mechanostrider, and would not have lost a moment before galloping at his unsuspecting enemy, range caliber in hand. Gnomes know machines, even goblin ones, and before Gallywix could understand what would be happening to him, range caliber would be planted right into the spider tank, short-circuiting the entire contraption. The escape seat would react even before the trade prince and propel him away from the danger, sitting on a goblin turbo trike meant for a quick escape. The two combatants would thus find themselves running after each other in the Badlands, racing more than fighting, as Gallywix tries to escape a vengeful strike from range caliber. He would try messing with the gnome by throwing grenades behind him and whatever scrap he could use, but the Mechanostrider is swift enough to dodge this. Normally, this would be a very bad position for the goblin, but his knowledge of race circuits gave him a terrain advantage against the gnome. Driving around in the desert while terrifying the local wildlife, their competition would be at a standstill, and Mekkatorque would strategically release flocks of mechanical chickens to trap his opponent. As a result, when Gallywix would make the unexpected move of turning himself around to launch on a vulnerable grenade against the tinker, he would be met with a flurry of metal pics, intent of driving themselves from his mortars. Both vehicles would explode at the same time, their users away from them already. Now on foot, facing each other, this would finally look like a proper duel. Clad in heavy armor, mechanical shield and ranged caliber in hand, Gelbin would be facing a very underarmed Gallywix. The Goblin would not be dismayed for that much, however, and would put a dagger, ready to defend his life. He would barely approach the Gnome and taunt him, laughing despite his disadvantage as the king moves in carefully, expecting tricks and traps. Deciding not to be overconfident, Gelbin would use his mithril goggles to do a quick analysis of all of the Goblin's characteristics. He would find out about the danger the Trade Prince represents, despite looking like someone who never fought in his life. He would eliminate the risk and use the last piece of tech to completely give himself advantage. Aiming at the Goblin with a gnomish shrink ray, he would try to reduce him to the size of a cat in order to squash him. The problem with gnomish technology, even when it doesn't explode, is its tendency to have unexpected results. Instead of shrinking Gallywix, the shrink ray would enlarge him and make him the size of a cliff. Quite a bit surprised at this turn of events, the Goblin would not have the time to take advantage and squash Gelbin. Using the fault in the device, the Gnome King would simply try to shrink himself and the same result would follow. Now the size of giants able to take on Deathwing, Mekkatorque and Gallywix would battle, visible all the way from Ironforge to Blackrock Mountain. The fight would be vicious, as both combatants would try to hit weak points in the other, but Gelbin's armor and weapon give him a neat advantage. Gallywix has been in harder fights than this, and the giant Mekkatorque will probably end up with a bloody nose, but the Goblin can hardly do more than run and dodge, something difficult to do when you're a giant trapped in a maze of cliffs. After a brutal melee and probably more than a few antique runes trampled to dust, Mekkatorque would have Gallywix on the ropes, beaten and hurt, forced down by the king's boot. The Gnome would try to end it by locking the Goblin's neck in ranged caliber and electrocute him, and only Gallywix's strong arms can let him hold the weapon away with his bare hands. At this point, their struggle would have lasted long enough for the effects of a shrieking ray to disappear, and in this position they would be reduced to their normal sizes, but not at the same time. The Goblin would shrink just slightly before the Gnome, and the ensuing confusion could allow him one last gambit. He would activate his last grenade, laughing like a madman, and shove it in the face of Mekkatorque at the expense of his own safety. Now, the Gnome would have a perfect occasion to end his enemy, but the grenade would likely kill them both. With only logic as a way of reasoning, Mekkatorque's only option would be to jump back, exactly what Gallywix had hoped for. The Goblin would follow through by throwing the explosive at the Gnome, who could do nothing aside from protecting himself with his weapon and armor. Ranged caliber would be propelled away under the blast, and the armor opened while the old Gnome ends up struck against a rock. Before he can regain his composure, the Goblin would follow through with his dagger and plait it in the king's vulnerable neck. All Mekkatorque would do would be to spew blood, making an easy target for his enemy, and the Trade Prince would take pleasure in pincing him again and again. All that would be left in the Badlands would be the rubble from the Battle of Giants, tons of burned-up tech, a historically laughing Goblin, and an old armor Gnome fallen among so many others. Well, that's not an expected turn of events. Mekkatorque had better armor, better weaponry, and even better strategy. What failed him? First, his aging body, and second, his ability to understand his opponent. Gallywix is ready to be crazy to win, and it worked out. The Gnome King lacked the street smarts of combat to duke it out with the Trade Prince. The winner is Jastor Gallywix, a big G, Trade Prince of a Bilgewater cartel. Well, now I'll be avoiding Tinkers altogether. The number of factors to take into account is just too much. I suppose it's another victory for the Horde here, although I normally tend to favor the Alliance. Next time, the battle with the Ganaple's firepower and necromancy. We'll have a duel between Gul'dan, the first warlock and chieftain of the Storm River clan, and Kel'Thuzad the Lich, the lieutenant of the Lich King and perhaps the greatest necromancer aside from his own master. I'm out until then.